This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Did Deion Sanders say that he's going to veto any attempt for the Cleveland Browns to draft Shedeur Sanders? A lot of people are taking this clip as that, but let's listen to the whole clip and see if that's actually what's going on here or if people are missing some context about what this clip actually means.
Will you step in Eli Manning like, Deion Sanders like, to the point where, like, you told him, hey, man, I ain't taking that psych test with the Giants. I followed you after that. I said I wasn't taking it either. Will you step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the first quote that a lot of people are reacting to. Now, I think there's a couple of things that we should take note. One, does Deion and Shedeur, do they have the collective power to be able to make this actually happen? It's one thing if this is what they intend on doing during the draft process. It's another thing if they can actually make it happen. I think if a team, even if it's not the Browns, and I think there's more to this clip, we'll play it in a second. I think if a team really wants to draft Shedeur, even if Deion don't like it, they're going to be able to do it. Because what is stopping Deion from making that happen? Is he going to say that Shedeur isn't going to show up to camp? Are they just going to forfeit the first few years of his NFL career in order to force him somewhere else? I highly doubt that. It's not like Shedeur has a ton of other outside athletic interests. So I don't think that's going to be happening. Another thing to consider is the Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning thing, right? Like when they bring up Eli Manning, they don't bring up the other half of that conversation, which is that Phillip Rivers was also in that draft. That was a heavy quarterback draft. There were multiple quarterbacks who could have went number one overall. It just so happened that Eli did not want to go to the Chargers. The Chargers had the number one overall pick, but also the Chargers were okay with not drafting Eli and going after Phillip Rivers. So from the outside looking in, it looks like, oh, the Manning family put their feet down and stopped Eli from becoming a Charger. But in reality, what happened was that they traded. The Chargers wanted Phillip Rivers. The Giants really wanted Eli Manning. The Manning family wanted that. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Let's make a trade. And they made a trade. And that's what happened here. Is there a Phillip Rivers to Shedeur Sanders in this draft class? If there's not, then the chances of them being able to successfully navigate their way to whatever team they want or stronghand their way to a team they want is not really going to happen. And I think that's the important part of why Deion said, no, I'm not going to do this publicly. Because, yeah, there's the respectability element of that. Deion doesn't want to negotiate in public and all of that. But let's be real here. We're talking about Deion Sanders. When does Deion Sanders not do something publicly? He calls his offensive lineman out publicly, right? We remember that. He recruits what school he's going to go to publicly. Like, Deion always takes the public option when it comes to trying to get what he wants. So I think it's interesting on this one, he's already said he's not going to do this publicly, because what Deion does not want to do is try to play his leverage in the public when he knows that he doesn't have enough leverage to make happen what he says is going to happen. What's going to happen here is whether Deion wants Shedeur to go to a team or not, Shedeur's probably going to go to whatever team drafts him. Like, I just don't think that Deion has the control that a lot of people are assuming. Because, again, what is the leverage play? If Caleb Williams couldn't force a team to make a different decision, and he's Caleb Williams, one of the most sought-after prospects we've ever seen, it's not going to happen with Shedeur Sanders. who's not Caleb Williams, right? I remember the same conversation happened with Joe Burrow. What's likely to happen is that a team is going to draft Shedeur and Deion's going to come out and say, yeah, I worked behind the scenes to make this happen. It's bullshit, but it is what it is. And look, we're just talking about today if it's even possible for Deion Sanders to do this, given where Shedeur Sanders is. We haven't even factored in if Shedeur Sanders is remotely a good enough prospect to justify any of this. And I like Shedeur as a quarterback. I don't think Shedeur has a bad chance of becoming a good quarterback, but he's not Caleb Williams. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Josh Allen. He's not a can't miss prospect coming out of Colorado. He's a quarterback prospect who you have a ton of questions about, which is fine. You can draft those guys in the first round. But that's a guy like a Ryan Tannehill when he went in the first round, or a Lamar Jackson when he went late in the first round. And those guys don't get to dictate where they're going to go. Even the Joe Burrows of the world, who are undoubted number one overall picks, don't get to dictate where they're going to go, because the truth is when you sign up for the NFL draft, you are allowing that structure to choose your team. There's not much you can do about it. You can have a really famous father. It doesn't matter. And again, people are going to throw Eli Manning out there, but that was a completely different situation. One, the Chargers didn't feel too pressed about it because they liked Phillip Rivers to begin with and were pretty secure that they could get Phillip Rivers when they pick swapped with the New York Giants. And two, the Manning family holds more weight in NFL circles than the Sanders family does. The Sanders family holds a lot of weight to NFL fans. The Manning family holds weight to NFL ownership circles. And even then, if Phillip Rivers weren't in that 04 draft class, we're not talking about an Eli Manning situation. We're talking about that one summer Eli Manning waited a while to sign his rookie deal before he played the rest of his career as a San Diego Charger. So the conversation with Shedeur is twofold. We're focusing on the can he do it if you wanted to draft him, force you not to draft him. The answer to that to me is no, for a lot of reasons. And I think Deion knows the answer is no. The second part of this is hey, is Shedeur even a good enough prospect to justify any of that? And that's why I don't think Deion's going to want to do this publicly, because he understands that he loves his son. He thinks his son is a great quarterback prospect, but he also knows his son is not that caliber of quarterback prospect where he could just make demands and think that he has any shot of making that happen, right? Because if Deion were truly intent on making sure his kid doesn't play somewhere, he would do like he did when he was in the draft. Remember when Deion was in the draft and he refused to go to the Lions because he knew he had the leverage to not go to the Lions? And he was public about that? There's a change in tactic here for Deion than what he normally does. And I think that's because he realizes he doesn't have the leverage. But there's more to this clip here too. So let's listen.
Okay.
So you said you're going to be dad. You're going to be dad. You're going to be dad.
I'm dad. The cows come home. Yes, sir. And with Travis as well.
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting that's your other son.
That's your other son.
But give us a little bit more insight on where you would like to. You don't even have to name teams. You can just give me region, style, whatever that Shedeur needs or you want to see him go and play for. You don't have to give me teams. Just give me regions.
I'm not going to give you regions. I give you understanding.
Give me understanding.
Somebody that can handle the quarterback that he is. Somebody that can handle understanding that what he's capable of. Someone that has had success in the past handling quarterbacks, or someone in an organization understands what they're doing. Not just throwing you out there amongst the wolves if you don't have the support in the infrastructure of the team. Forget the line. He's played with lines that hadn't been great, but he's been able to do his thing. But just the infrastructure of the team and the direction of where we're going. He could deal with anything. One thing about Shedeur that separates him from a lot of quarterbacks, Shedeur started every game in high school, every game in college, but one. And he's just, he is like that, man. He has a true gift. And it comes from God, and he loves this game of football.
All right. Another thing to note there, right? He's talking about where he would want him to go. And literally, what he described there could be any team. You can talk yourself into any team having that. He said nothing specific. He said a team that knows what they're doing with the quarterback position or has somebody who knows what they're doing with the quarterback position. He wasn't specific on what that is. That could be the Raiders. You can make the argument that's the Browns. You can make the argument that that's Carolina. My whole point here is this DEION saga is going to be fun to listen to, especially if you're a quarterback needy team like the Browns project to be in November, December, and February. But the truth is, he does not have the power to force a team to not take Shedeur. And I don't think it's likely that he thinks that the Browns are such a bad situation that he outright decides to publicly go against that happening. Now, that might be the case. Maybe he didn't like that they booed him in the Deshaun Watson situation, and he didn't like how that whole thing played out, and he decides he doesn't want his kid to touch the Cleveland Browns. And if you're somebody who is really in on the Shedeur Sanders experience, then that could discourage you from the whole thing. I just don't think that DEION is under the impression, because he knows how this business is, that he is going to be able to force a move for wherever Shedeur is going to go or not go. Like, that is, I think, the most important part of this. Can Deion Sanders actually do it? And from listening to that clip, I don't even think Deion thinks he can do that. I think what Deion is trying to do is much simpler than this, right? He's trying to work it so he can get concessions from whatever team drafts Shedeur Sanders, knowing he can't prevent somebody from taking Shedeur and developing him. He might want to put himself in a position where maybe he can work out a couple of concessions with whatever team drafts him, which would be the smart thing to do as somebody in his position, right? Like, you want to make sure if you could get Shedeur a quarterback coach that you prefer, then you can work that out as a concession. If you want to get Shedeur or a team to guarantee that they're going to invest in a wide receiver position, then that's a concession you can work out. I don't think he's going for absolute rejection here. I think he's just trying to angle himself in a place to wherever Shedeur gets drafted, he gets some kind of concession for his son to make sure he's putting his son in the right position. And Travis Hunter, maybe he goes just as far to do that. But I think that's the play here for Deion, because the idea that a lot of people are believing right now that Deion is just going to be able to just shut down the NFL and make them not take his son, which is something that only John Elway was able to do successfully without any other leverage coming from a different player in that draft class. And even then, he needed the leverage of the New York Yankees wanting him to play for them in order to do it. Like, Shedeur ain't got that kind of leverage in this year's draft. I mean, Kyler Murray had similar leverage to John Elway. He couldn't pull it off. It's just not going to happen. He can't stop a team from drafting him. He knows that. But what he can do is get a concession from whatever team drafts him if they're not the perfect spot in his mind for Shedeur Sanders. I get the argument from some people if they think it's a one quarterback draft. I don't think it's a one quarterback draft, but if you think it's a one quarterback draft, you can make the argument that Shedeur does have the sufficient leverage because he's the one quarterback in your mind that you feel like should go in the first round or something like that. But even if that's the case, that's not the leverage that people think it is, because even if he is the one quarterback, quote unquote, in a one quarterback draft, that doesn't mean that he's like a life-changing prospect that people would be willing to go through all this over. Again, the only dude that straight up got away with this, right, is John Elway. And he's John Elway. None of these quarterbacks coming out of John Elway. Like, they're not the caliber of prospect John Elway is. So the idea of getting away with that with somebody like Shedeur is just not going to happen. The same can be said with Eli Manning, the second guy to get away with that, because yeah, Eli wasn't like a jaw-dropping prospect, but his last name's Manning. And we see how we going crazy for Arch Manning, and he's sitting the bench right now. So we know the power of that last name. And look, I'm saying this is somebody who isn't even like there yet with wanting to draft Shedeur Sanders in the first round. Like, I go back and forth between him and Milroe all the time. I'm saying this, if you're a Browns fan and you legitimately think Shedeur Sanders is a top tier quarterback, but you're already kind of gearing yourself up for disappointment because you think Deion's not going to let you draft him, that's not as real as some people make it out to be. We do this every draft cycle with a bunch of different quarterback prospects where we're like, oh, this quarterback prospect, he's not going to allow himself to go to Oakland or Carolina or wherever insert team is. But you know what happens every year? 32 players get drafted in the first round and 32 players go to the team that drafted them. If he wants to be a football player, he has to do the draft. And if he wants to be in the draft, he has to accept that he has to play for whatever team drafts him. That's just what it is. We can act like it's not that way. I remember Caleb Williams' father was acting like he was going to force Caleb Williams to go one way or the other. Remember the whole Joe Burrow thing where people were acting like he was going to be able to force his way one way or the other. Same thing with Trevor Lawrence. He was going to be able to force his way one way or the other. But at the end of the day, these dudes get drafted to the teams that select them. There's really only been one John Elway situation. Even the Eli Manning situation is highly overrated to what actually happened. Right? That was less about Eli forcing himself somewhere else and more about the fact that the Chargers liked somebody well enough that they didn't feel like dealing with the Manning family if they were to make that selection, right? Like they were like, all right, well, he wants to do that. We'll just take Phillip Rivers. We're fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal here. So I think a lot of the conversation around Deion misses the point. Deion Sanders is not going to stop Shedeur from coming to your team, no matter where you play. He's not going to stop Shedeur from coming to your team. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Deion Sanders has the power to force his kid to be drafted to a specific spot? If so, why do you think that is the case, right? What is stopping a team like the Browns or a team like the Panthers from turning that card in when Deion has no say over that card being turned in? What power moves do you think Deion Sanders could pull that's realistic about the future of Shedeur Sanders' career in order to force his way, if you do think that Deion could do this? I just don't think that if you're looking at how the draft works, he has enough power, and I think he knows that because he's not choosing to pursue this publicly. He's saying, I'm going to work behind the scenes to get what I want, which means he'll make a concession with whatever team drafts him to get some things that make him feel more comfortable about where his son is going. That's my thoughts, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.